Hi, this is John Rowell with the Rowell Report. Today is Friday, October 3rd, 2025. And what I'd like to do today is to compare three different mapping services in three different areas in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So I want to show you the differences that can impact decision making and the perception of who is winning, who is progressing. Um, has this war fallen to stagnation? And um, the overall perception of what's going on in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So the mapping is a big part of understanding who is winning. And although the Russians are waging a war of attrition, they're still advancing along the line, and that is part of the attrition strategy, to advance slowly, bring troops closer, hit them with artillery, mop up the area where they um, had aimed their artillery, and then advance another distance and start over. So anyway, the first area, and probably the most important area, is the Pokrovsk uh, conglomerate. So here we have the deep state map, which is a pro-Ukrainian map. And basically the Ukrainian narrative is that the Ukrainians split the Russian salient. We have here the salient going up to Zoloty Kolodiaj. This salient apparently was cut by the Ukrainians into three chunks, and there were three groups of Russians who were surrounded, and the Ukrainians were finishing them off, uh, bit by bit, and that they would eliminate this salient, which the Russians had carried out some time ago. So that is the narrative we've been getting in the news, and which has um, been used to justify decisions to continue, um, the support of Ukraine, because they're turning the tide. They'll be able to retake all the territory. Okay, so this is the deep state map. And so let me see if I can get the drawing tool here. So anyway, so I'm just going to draw the three little chunks. We got one, we got two, and we got three. So these three chunks were so we got one, two, and three. And these are the three chunks that apparently Ukraine had cut and were now slowly eating away at the edges and eliminating the Russian forces that were in these three areas. Okay, this is the deep state map. Okay, now let's go to the military summary map. And in the military summary map, recently the Russians had made advances in this north tip. This is by Zoloty Kolodiaj, or I don't know how you say that, but anyway. So apparently, according to military summary, which is a neutral mapper, we have the Russian line still intact. It has not been cut into chunks, and the Russians are advancing here near Biwetsky. The Russians are starting to advance, and there's several gray zones here, of which we don't know who's winning, who's losing. So that's pretty normal in the fog of war. And sometimes we're getting news several days after um, the area is taken. Especially for the Russians, they don't announce they've taken an area until they've completely cleared it. So we won't see any updates probably from either side. And then now let's go to so here we can see again, this is the thrust of the Russian forces, and according to the neutral mapper, it's still intact. and the Ukrainians had advanced towards the one of the base of this small advance, but had not completely cut it off. So we're going to go now to a pro-Russian mapper, and here we have a completely different story from the Ukrainian deep state map. So here's the deep state map, and here's the three different chunks, and here is the Russian mapper. So you can see that this area is quite intact, and the Ukrainians are shown to have advanced towards the base of this large rectangle, but had not taken it. So anyway, you can see that there is quite a bit of difference. This is in the Pokrovsk area, and so all these maps help people to make decisions. Of course, in the Pentagon in Washington, we have General Keane of the Joint Chiefs, and he's supporting the version of General Kellogg, and General Kellogg is getting his information from Kiev. So he's basically the cheerleader for Kiev, and he will construct a narrative that's supportive of Kiev. So again, we have the pro-Ukrainian mapper, we have the neutral mapper, and we have the pro-Russian mapper. Okay, so also we can take a look at the city of Pokrovsk. Here, if we want to start with the pro-Russian mapper, we have Novoekonomichne is quite a bit back from the area that the Russians have taken, so you can see that a little bit better. Novoekonomichne. According to the pro-Russian mapper, the Russians are basically on the outskirts of the urban area of Mirnograd, and if we go into the neutral mapper, this mapper also has Novoekonomichne quite a bit back from the front line, which is out on the outskirts of the urban area of Mirnograd. And now we go to the pro-Ukrainian mapper, and we'll get out of this. So here's Novoekonomichne. So according to the pro-Ukrainian mapper, the Russians haven't reached Novoekonomichne. They're still at the edge, and they certainly haven't reached Mirnograd. So this also is quite a difference between the three mappers. And based on these different maps, politicians and generals and military planners make decisions. So it's pretty important to know exactly where the front line is. Okay, now we're going to move on to another area, which is called Kupiansk. And here is Kupiansk, according to the pro-Ukrainian mapper. And so we have, again, this kind of salient. We have the gray zone, which is the fog of war, which hard to know who is actually in control of those areas. And so we have the Russians close to Kupiansk, but still basically on the edge of the urban area. And you can see here to the east there is a industrial area. You can't really perceive it too well from this map, but anyway, now we'll move on to the neutral mapper. So the neutral mapper has the Russians basically reaching the center of Kupiansk, and also with a salient flanking Kupiansk to the west. And again, we have the industrial area, which is the gray zone. So now let's move on to the pro-Russian mapper. In the pro-Russian mapper, we have quite a bit more area. if you compare Deep State with the pro-Russian mapper, you can see how much more the Russians perceive that they are taking in the Kupiansk area than the pro-Ukrainians. And the neutral mappers, basically base their maps off of confirmed videos or official reports that are reliable. So we have kind of in between with the neutral. So here we have Deep State, we have neutral, and we have Russian. So this is Kupiansk. So according to this, basically the whole northern part of Kupiansk is taken, and so this supports the narrative that the Ukrainians will soon be trapped in the Kupiansk pocket. And so now let's move on to the final area I want to show you. Of course, here is the deep state map, which is the pro-Ukrainian map. And we have the city called Milove. And there is a Russian advance into Ukraine that is quite limited, and it has not reached Chuhunivka or Ambarny, and it certainly hasn't reached Odradne. So now let's go to the neutral mapper, and we have the neutral mapper pointing out that the Russians have reached Odradne, and agrees on the position that it has not reached Chuhunivka. But there is a new advance towards Katnie. So now let's move on to the pro-Russian mapper. And here we have Katnie, and we have Odradne, and we even have advances to the east of Odradne. So we have quite a bit more of territory. Let's move this a little more into focus. And here we have, the neutral mapper, and we have the pro-Ukrainian mapper. So between the pro-Ukrainian mapper and the pro-Russian mapper, we have quite a difference of perception of the Russian advances or the Ukrainian defensive lines, and the neutral mapper seems to be much more aligned with the pro-Russian mapper. So I'll put the links to all these three sources below. You're welcome to go check it out yourself. I just wanted to point out the difference in the maps. Of course, what President Trump is going to get is what is brought to him by Lindsey Graham, by Keith Kellogg and friends. I think Marco Rubio also is in the camp of Keith Kellogg. And the surprising figure in all of this is J.D. Vance. He used to be very objective in his point of view regarding the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Wanting the United States to pull out of the conflict, wanting the country to spend its time and energy improving the United States, and pulling away from all these endless wars. But now J.D. Vance has gone full neocon and dove in with the same narratives as Kellogg and Rubio and all those folks. So anyway, all those decisions, are being made based off of maps, and the maps are putting before President Trump. What version is he getting? Of course, he has the possibility, all the time he sends on his phone and posting True Social truths. He could certainly be checking out maps for himself and asking questions, but he's getting the narrative on the golf course from Lindsey Graham that the Ukrainians are turning the tide, And if you were to look at this, if you were to look at this map of Pokrovsk, and you were to say, look, the Russian advance has been stopped. Their forces are being chopped up, and soon the Russians will start to pull back to the border. So anyway, this is what President Trump is getting, and unfortunately, this involves massive decisions. President Trump is now thinking that the Ukrainians can win, and he will soon be sending over the there's two missile systems. There's uh, the missile launch with the Typhoon launcher, that is the Tomahawk, and there is another missile system which they're going to introduce, which is low cost, has a range of 500 kilometers. And so basically what they're going to try to do is to do a decapitation strike, or to do a massive strike on Moscow. So anyway, in any case, the Russians have they have adapted to the attackums, and they certainly will be ready for the tomahawks when they come. Of course, the tomahawk could be sent with a nuclear warhead. So this is where the escalation comes in. When you see the tomahawk coming, you don't know if it's nuclear or not, and then decisions are made in 2 or 3 minutes that could end the world. So we're in a very dangerous period, and President Trump is probably seeing these pro-Ukrainian maps. The one thing I have to say is that the pro-Ukrainian maps are quite a bit behind the um, the current situation on the ground. So in order to get the current situation, you probably want to go to a neutral mapper who's taking actual information that is published with real confirmations, rather than a pro-Ukrainian map. But the deep state map is probably what President Trump is seeing, and if that's the case, it's quite unfortunate. Bad decisions will be made, and as you can see, the United States is going to get deeper and deeper and deeper into this conflict, and this will be quite a bit of a reversal from the America First um, platform which President Trump campaigned on. So I want to thank you for joining me for this video. If you've stayed until now, if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. Thank you for supporting independent journalism, and I wish you a very good day. Bye-bye.